morning, everyone. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you and your loved ones are healthy and safe. My name is Randy Bell, and I'm the director of the Global Energy Center at the Atlantic Council. Thank you all for joining us for EnergySource Innovation Stream this morning, where we highlight new energy technologies with the potential to reshape the global energy system. Today, we'll be hearing from Heath Taylor, Government Solutions Manager at SICPA, to discuss innovations in fuel integrity technology and the potential for technological solutions to counter fuel-related crime. If this is a topic you are interested in, please check out the Global Energy Center's recent report called Downstream Oil Theft, Countermeasures and Good Practices. This is the latest in a series of papers over the past 4 years on this topic, and you can find all this work on the Atlantic Council website. And then for those of you who don't know about SICPA, the company Heath works for, it's a really, really cool company based in Switzerland that creates products that enable trust in the economy. In addition to fuel integrity technology, they produce secure inks for currency, solutions for helping trace goods throughout the value chain, and tools that give you confidence that what you're buying is authentic. About a year and a half ago, I went to the headquarters in Lausanne and was blown away by the creativity and technological innovation they bring to countering fraud. I think you're all going to like this presentation today. Before we get started, 2 administrative details. First, you can follow us on Twitter at AC Global Energy and use the hashtag InnovationStream. Second, after Heath's presentation, you can submit questions through the Q&A function on Zoom, and I'll try to get to as many of these as I can. If you're watching on another platform like YouTube, unfortunately, we cannot take your questions. So please let me welcome Heath Taylor to the Atlantic Council. Heath, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Randy. Just let me share the presentation.
So Heath, well, we'll get started with your presentation. We're really looking forward to this. So
okay,
go ahead.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Randy. Hello, everybody in the audience. Thank you all for taking the time to be here today. My name is, as Randy said, is Heath Taylor. I work for SICPA in Switzerland, which is a global provider of security solutions for highly sensitive products, such as banknotes, value documents such as passports, excisable products, and of course, petroleum products, which is why we are here today. The extent of fraud and malpractice in the hydrocarbon supply chains is still largely an unrecognized problem, or at least one which, quite surprisingly, is not given too much discussion given its magnitude and impact on governments, citizens, and the environment. The Council, of course, has done great work to elucidate it, and at SICPA, we have been working to apply our knowledge in high-security fields to innovate, to produce technological solutions that can be used to tackle hydrocarbons fraud effectively. One of the key approaches highlighted by Dr. Ian Rolby in his latest report was concrete countermeasures, of which the marking of fuel products in the supply chain, which allows fraud to be detected, was highlighted as one of them. Generally, if governments understand and police fuel supply chains and enforce compliance, the inevitable effect is that tax revenues will arise, and the quality of fuel, so will the quality of fuel for the general populace. This is a virtuous spiral which we would like to facilitate. I'd like to set out first how a service provider such as SICPA can help the government authorities create the right overall environment for success, and touch on some of the challenges in the field, and then finish with some thoughts about future challenges and developments. I think it almost goes without saying that there are many aspects to the problem, and on-the-ground experience, combined with an innovative approach, adaptability, are essential for success. This is the approach which SICPA has always worked towards, partnering with governments and developing new solutions, be it for banknotes, tax stamps for excise products, identity protection, and what we're going to talk about today, solutions to protect fuel integrity. So, how do we help governments tackle fuel integrity issues? What are the different facets of the in-country situation we need to consider? I think as a starting point, one way to look at a national fuel integrity solution is to simplify it. When broken down, it is simply a set of legislative commercial, operational, and technical problems to solve to achieve the goal of minimizing loss to tax revenue and maximizing the integrity of the distributed fuel products. As has been very well articulated in the Council's reports, downstream fuel supply chains are rife with illicit fuel, representing a very large revenue loss to many governments, as well as causing other issues such as environmental damage. SICPA's main offering to tackle this is based around fuel marking. This involves the injection of a molecular marker into taxed fuels at a specifically predetermined quantity at key points in the supply chain, and then accompanied by equipment to test the fuel in the field, which can detect the precise concentration of marker, which tells you if the fuel has been adulterated. So you may be asking, why would we want to know whether the fuel has been adulterated? Essentially, by choosing the right point to inject the marker, for example, when import duty or excise taxes are paid, means the marker is an effective quantitative determination of the tax which has been paid on the fuel, or to quote our internal jargon, a fiscal marker. Therefore, if an expensive or highly taxed fuel such as gasoline is adulterated with a cheaper product such as kerosene, this can be very swiftly determined. Simply put, the measurement of adulteration, or measurement and detection of adulteration rather, indicates that evasion of taxes and duties has taken place, and this is the first step to allow the relevant authorities to recuperate the tax underpayment. In order to implement a program of this nature, of course, we cannot just arrive in a country and with our equipment and start marking and testing fuel. There are preparations that need to be undertaken to ensure that the program will be well perceived in the country and to achieve its aims. The first thing to consider is the legal context. Putting in place a solution which, when in operation, will have A, operational obligations, and B, legal consequences for non-compliance, requires the appropriate legal framework to be put in place. And what's more, these regulations need to be very specific if they are to work. They need to clearly state which fuels are eligible for marking, where they will be marked, and finally, the obligation of the various stakeholders in the supply chain, such as refiners, importers, and depot owners, to allow marking operations to be conducted on their premises, giving a clear mandate to the service provider to work to. Regulations also need to make clear that the relevant government authority will perform inspections in the field and compel economic operators to grant access to premises to allow this activity. Additionally, the powers of the inspectors need to be clearly defined, for example, closure or confiscation, and clearly define the penalties applicable for those found in possession of illicit fuel. Secondly, and of equal importance, is to conduct a campaign of awareness and education amongst the stakeholders in the country. While resistance to change is a natural human phenomena, and resistance by stakeholders who may be benefiting from the illicit fuel is a given, we know at SICPA that care must be taken to ensure the following three factors. Firstly, to ensure minimal impact and disturbance on the fuel refining, import, or distribution operations, and that the market itself must have no impact on the properties of the fuel. Secondly, to guarantee that compliance testing in the field of the various economic operators should not negatively affect them, i.e., we can never have a positive result which later is proved to be negative. And then finally, consumers must benefit directly from reduction in fuel adulteration, meaning, for example, they can be assured that the corresponding positive impact on vehicle engines, air quality, and the environment in general is good for the general populace. Once the required environment has been created, the next stage is efficient solution implementation. Prior to starting any activities, we need to ensure we have correctly understood the specific problems in the country. Clarity on the specific fraud patterns is essential and requires discussion with the government authorities as well as our own independent research. Additionally, we need to be clear about the relative priorities to facilitate smooth implementation and to be sure to align to the client or government client's expectations. Other information needed concerns the operational specifics of the country itself. Information such as the volumes to be marked, as well as the infrastructure considerations such as the number of border entry points, refineries, and depots. This is vital in order to understand operational parameters such as physical infrastructure required, headcount, and equipment requirements. And of course, since most countries have existing IT systems in some shape or form, at SICPA, we know it is important to work with the client to determine any integration requirements, maximizing the potential for meaningful business intelligence from the information collected from SICPA system, also when matched with other data sources, in order to provide better insight into economic operator behavior. When the operational period starts in any fuel integrity program, this means we are out and about on the ground conducting marking operations and supporting inspections. So our marking teams will mark the fuel at the designated points, record the quantities marked using procedures which ensure integrity and avoid marker loss. This is extremely important. The marker is critical and is ensured that every milliliter is accounted for using ISO-compliant operating procedures. SICPA then provides equipment for government inspections in the field and technicians to operate what we call mobile laboratory. These mobile laboratories are a unique aspect of SICPA's offering and allow for real-time evidential proof of transgression and significantly enhance capability of law enforcement authorities by allowing the following two things. First of all, the immediate result in the field allows inspectors to take immediate action based on absolute proof of transgression, being the level of adulteration detected if present. Secondly, the provision of court-admissible evidence for ongoing enforcement activity, such as data from inspections, along with video footage of the inspection and event, all uploaded in real time to provide any prosecution authority with inadmissible evidence in the event of a transgression. Then once again, for the general management and control of the fuel supply chain, these two data sets, the marking and inspection data, are progressively built up and provide information based on the volumes of fuel marked, and then in the turn, the inspection data provides information on the number, location, and the results of the field inspections. These data sets can be, the first data set can be reconciled with tax declarations to find any anomalies, to determine if there's been any implication of tax underpayment. And then the second allows us to highlight hotspots in the country where there are significantly more areas of illicit fuel, allowing the government to have a strategy to deploy inspection resource in the areas where they're most needed. And then, of course, all this data collected on all levels of the program is very important in measuring the program impact in order to allow the program to evolve with the customer needs and, of course, to show them that the program is indeed working. Innovation is a core part of the SICPA approach. We are constantly seeking product improvements based on our experience in the field and R&D capabilities, looking at new technologies, as well as looking into longer-term trends. I'd like to highlight two trends in particular. One, the impact of digitization in the fuel supply chain and the transition to renewable energy. Without descending into overused cliches, the world is digitizing at a dizzying pace, and that includes fuel supply chains. On a basic level, our solution utilizes connected objects such as digital scales for marking and the analyzers for checking the level of marker or adulteration in the fuel. There are many other devices which we do not necessarily control used in the fuel supply chain, which also emit data, such as flow meters, GPS devices, sensors or seals in fuel tanker trucks or wagons, as well as applications to make waybill declarations, and so forth and so forth. This data, along with the fuel marking and inspection data, can be collected, compared, and analyzing using predictive analysis techniques and algorithms, which can give new insights into stakeholders' behavior by showing data patterns which can be used to infer, and with a more mature data set, predict the incidence of illicit activity. However, this remains a very complex process, even something of a holy grail, which does not always live up to its promising proposition. Firstly, In the downstream supply chain, generally the frequency of data events is quite low. If I can compare by citing an example from further in the upstream supply chain, for instance, signals emitted from a smart drill head, allowing the interpretation of these signals to determine the health of the drill head for the purpose of eliminating costly downtime. By contrast, most devices in the downstream supply chain emit data events at a far lower frequency, requiring a much longer time to build up sufficient data to have mature training sets with which we can identify patterns which infer fraud or make any meaningful predictions. Secondly, while it's true that connected devices in the fuel supply chain are becoming more ubiquitous, there are the factors of cost and ownership to consider. The big data paradigm has been ported from an environment where connectivity and emission of data are cheap and implicit in the functioning of the devices itself. In the fuel supply chain, however, generally devices have a cost and maintenance overhead, which may indeed outweigh the benefit of the potential insights the data they generate can bring. In the fuel supply chain, devices may have different specifications, standards, and owners. For example, OMCs may enforce GPS tracking in their own delivery fleets, and it may be different government departments who manage the Weibull system or the tax records. Each one of these stakeholders would have their own reasons to not want to place their data on a shared system for further analysis, making integration very complex. A major additional point to consider is that these current digital analysis techniques can only imply that fraudulent behavior has taken place, but cannot provide definitive proof of it. This means that, for the moment, physical proof of detection of adulteration or some other technology like this is still required to prove illicit behavior. Improving digital techniques is something we are focused on, and we are confident will optimize government's fight against fuel fraud and create the much needed transparency in the fuel supply chain. But more work is required. SICPA has already made inroads into the digital world, with excise tax in the US, for example, providing custom excise tax management solutions for Virginia, which is especially for fuel, and Kentucky for excise goods. Synergies between our existing products for the provision of more comprehensive solutions is also one of our top priorities. Moving on, development in the energy area, which may yet accelerate, is the global transition towards renewable energy sources. While fossil fuels are not going to disappear overnight, I think even the most risk-adverse forecasters must concur that fossil fuel usage will decline relative to renewables. With this in mind, SICPA is preparing itself for the introduction at scale of these new fuels into the energy supply chain. The criminal mind is eternally inventive, and without doubt, there will be new frauds. We intend to use our competencies to find solutions for these new fraud patterns and supply chain issues, which will inevitably emerge. But for now, there is still much to be done to ensure integrity and accountability in the fossil fuel supply chain. It should also be noted that any incentivization policy for governments for transition to renewables needs to be built on a well-managed and transparent fossil fuel supply chain in order to reap the real benefits of the transition process. This concludes my short talk. I hope you found it informative, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Council for inviting SICPA, with a special mention to the Council technical staff for providing the required video conferencing facilities, allowing us, in spite of the COVID crisis, to interact. Thank you very much for your time.
Heath, thanks so much. Really, really fascinating presentation. And I want to be sure to address at the end the question you raised about renewable technologies and ensuring integrity across those supply chains, because that's something that we're very, very interested in as well. But I do want to focus in the meantime on the liquid fuels piece. So hold that renewables thought, everybody. And if you have any questions, be sure to ask in the Q&A function. That is the best way to get a question out. First one from me, though. With COVID-19 dramatically reshaping government revenue streams and drastically dropping oil demand, how do you think, and people just aren't consuming gasoline, or diesel at the same level that they were earlier this year. How has the role or importance of fuel integrity programs changed? What does COVID-19 do to make these either more relevant or less relevant?
That's a very interesting question. So for me, I think, and what we all fundamentally hope for, is that the COVID-19 crisis and the resultant drop in demand for fossil fuels is a temporary situation. But having said that, it does impact government revenues for the relevant taxes that these products do incur. However, if you think about it, in the wake of the COVID-19 crisis, most governments have embarked on providing support and stimulus packages within the general economy at large. And for us at SICPA, we seem to think that there never has been a better time to promote a solution which would actually increase tax revenues and make the fossil fuel supply chain more transparent and effectively increase the tax revenues within the sphere. So for us at SIGPA, we feel that although albeit, I mean, the COVID-19 crisis has resulted in much economic distress, it does present an argument. It does present a good time for governments to make assessments of their fossil fuel supply chain, and it does also create fertile ground for our value proposition to grow in.
Heath, that's fascinating, and we're starting to get some really good questions from the audience. But I do want to invite one special guest to join us on screen to ask a question. We have Ian Ralby, who is the lead author on many of our reports on downstream oil theft, and senior fellow at the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center. Roger, if you can highlight Ian and bring him on. And Ian, right now you're on mute, but Ian, I know you have a question to ask.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Ian,
okay.
Good to see you.
Good to see you as well, and good morning. I'm always pleased to hear, Heath, your presentations, and I appreciate this one very much. But I actually want to build on Randy's question. As you know, we just put out a report on countermeasures and good practices in combating downstream oil theft and related hydrocarbons crime. But we also put out an article in Real Clear Energy just a few weeks ago on the COVID situation. And so I want to kind of build on what we were just talking about, say that we have found, oddly, that there is, in fact, in some cases, a greater incentive now for smuggling and adulteration, given, yes, the drop in price and demand, but the maintenance of cross-border price differentials. So in other words, yes, the overall cost is lower, but the difference between one side of the border and the other remains the same, which means that the incentive is actually higher. So I'm wondering if between that and what we're hearing about from fraud auditors, a major spike in fraud related to fuel, you're seeing any changes in the criminal dynamics. I think you spoke really well about the adaptation of criminal aspects. And so I'm wondering if there are new issues that we maybe haven't seen before that the COVID crisis is being able to highlight or elucidate. So would you be able to speak on any things that you're seeing in the field that might indicate that not only is this a good time for trying to reclaim tax revenue, it's also a good time for focusing on the criminal dynamics to get a better sense of how they shift and adapt so that we can become more predictive in how to combat them?
Well, thank you for the question. First of all, hi Ian, good to see you since Abu Dhabi, and thank you for the question. And I think this is also another very interesting question. To be honest, for our existing fuel marking programs, I think that it is too early to really have any concrete information regarding any changes in dynamics. I mean, the only thing that we can tell you is that there's been a huge drop in volume, but I mean, this is not exactly rocket science. So the one thing, though, leads me to speculate slightly on what you said in terms of new frauds. And for this, I think this is another subject quite close to your heart, which is subsidies. Now, I would imagine that one of the tools in any incentivization or stimulus package that a government can use post-COVID is subsidization, which may include the subsidization of fossil fuel products. So I would imagine if this is the case, then you're going to get many more fraud patterns developing around this, because as you know, and I think you've highlighted many times in your report, subsidies, or any country where there is subsidization of fossil fuel products, is very fertile ground for fraud and illicit trade.
Ian, thank you so much. Really appreciate you joining us. Okay, we've got a great question from the audience from Rich Kautz, and he asks if this technology can be applied in sanctions situations, such as in Iran, where you're prohibiting the sale and transit of their oil and products. Is this something that you could find a way of managing in a sanctions situation?
So if I understand correctly, is that what the gentleman is asking is, would we be able to detect Iranian fuel in a supply chain, in another country, in order to in order to determine that that fuel came from Iran and that it is sanctioned fuel?
Right. You know, for instance, you hear about, and I won't name names, but you hear about Iranian fuel making it into the supply chain, into the petroleum supply chain through a number of different major trading hubs. So, how would you think about using this technology to prevent that from happening?
So this is actually quite. I mean, this question is. I think we need to start looking at it more from the case of, it wouldn't have anything to do with Iran. It would have a lot to do with the country where this illicit fuel coming into the country is causing a problem. Let's take, for instance, hypothetically, we have a country which is bordering on Iran, which is subject to a lot of illegal importation from Iran. Now, the issue is that the incentive would be for the place where the illegal fuel is coming into to implement a program to counteract this. So if we implemented a program in that specific country, any fuel that came from Iran would not be marked, and we would detect that we detect not necessarily that it is Iranian fuel, but that the fuel in the local supply chain is adulterated. And I would say as well that we wouldn't need to know that it's Iranian fuel, because probably the biggest issue would be the loss of tax revenue based on the fuel coming in from Iran. So whether the fuel comes from Iran or from any other country is neither here nor there. So and if the gentleman is asking if the product, if it is political, if there's a political solution to effectively ban Iranian fuel, this is another question. But to detect the presence of a foreign fuel in the country through adulteration is infinitely possible with our fuel marking program. Just one other point on Iran is that using this country is actually quite. It resonates with me, because Iran, I think, other than Venezuela, has some of the cheapest diesel in the world. So Iranian diesel is cropping up all over the world as illicit fuel.
Got it. Fascinating. So the key is mark the licit fuel, and then you'll be able to know if illicit fuel is coming in, and if you're, it's very likely Iranian if you're in that neighborhood. We're really short on time, but I do want to get to that renewables question, because I think it is fascinating and points to the future. How do you think about tracing of renewables and all the metals, materials, et cetera, that go into that technology? Do you think of it at, say, making sure that solar panels that are coming in are authentic, or are you thinking about it in terms of the metals that and materials that are going into these products? Where do you think the best way of where do you think the real issues are, and the way in which SICPA might get involved?
So renewables is a relatively new field that, well, when I say new field, I mean, this is something which we've really been looking into, I mean, fairly recent, only recently now. And the first thing we're starting to realize is that with renewables, the fraud patterns will be different, and the solutions are probably going to be quite different as well. Now, as I say, we are in in the beginning of our exploration of this. All we know is that if we look at current trends, is that renewables will increasingly feature in countries' supply chains, and hence the frauds with them the frauds for them will come along with these new products. Now, if I just had to take the example of hydrogen, for instance, okay, the maybe, and I speculate here, maybe the general trend for fuel marking is not. We would mark for different reasons, say for hydrogen, because one of the reasons, say for instance, if they did an incentivization program for hydrogen from green sources, is that we would have to see that. So different technologies, such as technologies which provide proof of origin, may feature more and more in our solutions. But Randy, to be very frank with you, for me now to speculate too much on actual solutions for renewable energies, I would need to understand the fraud patterns, the fraud patterns which will emerge better. Which I'm the first one to admit that I don't really.
That's fascinating, and I like that you're pointing to this this question about the overall carbon footprint of the technologies that we're looking at deploying. Whether you're talking about green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, or brown hydrogen, where they are going to have different qualities that go into them, and being able to detect and know what you're actually paying for is fascinating. We are out of time, Heath. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Really, really a pleasure, and always a pleasure to hear from SICPA. Thank you all in the audience for joining us, and be sure to connect with Heath on LinkedIn. This presentation will be available on the Atlantic Council website, YouTube channel, Facebook, and Twitter. We have it everywhere. We'll have it everywhere. So please share it with your colleagues. I hope you will all join us for the next edition of Innovation Stream, which will be with ADNOC's Abdul Nasser, who's going to give us a virtual tour of their digital command center, their panorama suite. This is going to be on June 11th at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Additionally, later today at 10 a.m. Eastern, we hope you will join another Atlantic Council virtual event for a discussion of a new report by our Eurasia Center called New Challenges and Dwindling Returns for Russia's National Champions. The great Richard Morningstar, who importantly is my boss, will be moderating. Thank you, everyone who helped put this event together, including Olga Kokova, Katie Wimsat, Roger Morales, Brianna Pistone, Jasper Gilardi, and Tom Knoll. We're really looking forward to seeing you again on June 11th, if not sooner. Until then, please, everyone, stay safe and healthy. Thank you so much for joining us.